Hi guys, welcome to Table Talk. I'm Kessyl.
I'm Carol.
And today we have Calvin with us. He is the founder of Monsoon Diaries, which is a travel company. At the same time, he's working as an ER doctor. You guys might recognize him. I've interviewed him once because he's a travel person. He loves traveling, right? And he's visited North Korea, so we covered the news about North Korea and we had the pleasure of having on the show. And now we're so glad to have you back again.
It's good to be back. Thank you, Kessyl.
So today, but the last time he was here, we didn't have this show yet, but it's pretty new. It's our 16th episode. Means we started about 2 months ago.
Already.
So today we invited him back to talk about the differences of growing up in the US as an Asian American and I'm not sure if I should categorize us as international students, but that's the best way I can put us in a category right now. So we're gonna have a couple of questions on the screen, and then each of us are gonna answer that question individually according to our own experiences. Sure. So, but before that, can I ask you guys to talk about, I would say, this upbringing timeline? For example, from what year to what year you were where, and this year to this year you were here. Why not we start with Carol?
Okay, put on the spot all of a sudden. So I was born and raised in Taiwan, and I moved to Vancouver when I was 14. So it's kind of like a really weird time. You're in your teenage years, you don't really know who you are, you don't really speak the language, and all of a sudden you're being put into this new environment. You have to make new friends, and you have to learn the language, you have to go through ESL, and then learn social studies and all that, and try to get into university. So that, for me, was...
So which year was it when you moved to Vancouver?
I moved, I think, early 2000.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And since then you've been there?
I've been in Vancouver, but after I graduated, I went back to Taiwan to work for a few years, and then eventually I got relocated with my company to New York. So it's like...
So you would say most of your life is spent in Taiwan and Vancouver, like...
Yeah, I would say so. But right now it's kind of like I'm more familiar with New York, so...
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you, Calvin?
1986, I was born.
Now we know your age. I'm saying that's good.
And I never left. And that's it. I was born and raised in New York City, in Manhattan, and I've stayed there ever since. I went to high school, college, medical school, residency, and now I work all in the same city all my life. And this is why I run a travel company, partly for my own sanity of getting out as much as I can. So every month I try to go to a different country. That's how I balance it out.
Got it. So for me, I grew up in Malaysia, and 2015 I came here in the US to study. So I would say it's been, is that 3 years, almost going to 4. So all my life I was in Malaysia. So let us jump onto our first question.
Okay, that's a very long question.
Yep, it's like 8 seconds. But okay, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you want to go first, or I can go first?
Biggest culture shock? There are countless cultural shock moments for me. One is when I moved from Taiwan to Vancouver. Obviously, the school system was so much more relaxed than Taiwan. In Taiwan, starting from 6-year-old, you have homework every day. You have to go to cram school after school. So realize how much the teachers wanted to make decisions for yourself. That was the biggest cultural shock for me. Because in Asia, I don't know if that's the same in Malaysia, but usually you go to school and everything is already picked for you. You just basically just study. You're like a machine, you study and you make sure that you get 100% or like 85, hopefully. I never did. I was like 86, but that's what you aim for, and you want to get into good school. In terms of social interaction with friends and families and sports, all that kinds of extracurricular, not necessarily a big thing when you're growing up in school. So for me, that was the biggest culture shock. I can go on and on,
but this is the biggest.
Yeah.
Wow, that is very deep and very educated. But mine is more like, I was shocked that they had to use the dryer. Because in Malaysia, well, this is so...
Typical education, answer about education.
Like washing my clothes,
washing her hair, washing her clothes.
Yeah, because for me, it's like, in Malaysia, it's always summer. We never have... That's why when I first I used to study in West Virginia back in 2015, and I stepped off the plane, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm dying. My ears are hurting. It's so cold. It's like -6 Celsius. But in Malaysia, it's throughout the year.
It's a jungle.
Yeah, it's like 30 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
I don't know how, 90 Fahrenheit? I don't know. I'm really.
That's 90 plus degrees Fahrenheit for all of you Americans.
3 years in Malaysia, I still. Yep. So it's like, yeah, it's just we don't need a dryer because the sun is always out. So you just hang your clothes on the clothesline like ratchet, you know. But here I'm like, wow, the dryer is really. I was like, it's really unnecessary. Can I just have my clothes outside? But no, your clothes don't dry in winter or like when the rain just goes on and on and on. But yeah, that was the biggest.
You just wash it outside.
Yeah, but now it's like dryer, sure. You know, it's fast and.
Well, you have a machine that does it for you here.
Yep. So that question does not apply to Calvin because
I had culture shocks too.
Yeah, which is like I want to say it's in reward for you. Like for example, you have friends from other ethnicity or coming here to study in the States and you see them doing something like, oh my gosh, why do they do this? Because for us, another thing is like we don't wear our shoe into the house. But for Americans, you guys do it.
If you do that at my house, I'll kick you out. So you have to take off your shoes when you come to my house.
Yeah, so what was it for you?
I would say that it is kind of reverse because when I grew up in Manhattan and I didn't know that I was different from everyone else. So I think the biggest culture shock for me was when people started to learn how to be racist. They were of an age in elementary school when they started treating me differently based on how I looked. And when people ask me where you're from, and I would say New York City, and they would ask you where you're really from, that microaggression, I mean, they had good intentions, but that question creates this discomfort of, do I really belong here? Or why shouldn't I belong here? I was born here just like anyone else, and nobody would ask you the second qualifying question, where you're really from, if you're, of another ethnicity, or if you were white, or even you were black and sometimes Latino. And I think that was interesting to me. And then that second culture shock was realizing that New York City is not a normal city. I grew up believing that New York was just like any other city in the world until I went to college, when all these folks from outside of New York and international students would come to New York and saying, we're living the dream. This is, all what I always wanted.
Right.
And for me to realize, like, oh my God, New York is actually a place where the entire world dreams about coming and living and making a living here. And it's full of city of dreamers. It's a city full of dreamers. And for me as a native, I never really appreciated that. So to live vicariously through folks like, your Carol and, Kessyl yourselves, to see how you experience my city and my home with a different lens, to me makes me appreciate what I have here. And to me, that was a big culture shock in a positive sense.
Right.
So now, like, it actually made it harder for me to leave.
Yeah.
I've tried all this time to get out of New York to see what's out there, but people like yourselves, like coming to New York and seeing, like, how amazing and how the opportunities it can bring, and how is it so unique from many other places in the world, how diverse it is, now makes me feel like I'm in the best city in the world, and it's hard for me to ever experience anything else. So that's a good thing,
That's so good. Yeah, you've touched on a couple of. You gave us some answers that I'm going to touch on to later, but we'll just go this one by one. So moving on to our next question. So who would like to take this?
You go first.
I'll go first. You know what? Actually, mostly Asians. Because when I first came here to study, right, I'm like, yay! In Malaysia, we are all Asians, though. But so when I first came here to West Virginia, I'm like, yay, I'm going to have some white friends. I'm going to have some Colombian friends.
You're saying there were Asians in West Virginia other than yourself? I thought you were like population 1 when you
know, but so it's like I was shocked. I was actually like the only Malaysian in my class, or the only Asian in my class of 60 students. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have all this, friends who's like, don't look, that doesn't have the same skin color as me. But surprisingly, I feel, for me, I'm not sure if it's a prevalent thing, but for me personally, I tend to feel more comfortable hanging out with people that are of the same ethnicity as me. Because maybe we eat the same food, we have the same cultural background, their parents are like my parents. But again, I have like some American friends, or like, some international friends like from Korea, Japan. Oh, they're Asians, right? Or like Colombian, Spanish, or like, white Americans. So it's like, I have them, but it's always more Asian friends. I love how I talk about this with my friend before. It's like, you know, it's cool that we have Asian friends, just like how Americans have American friends. I see my university friends, like those white American friends, like they're all hanging out with their white American friends too, which is like normal. But it's like when you're hanging out with Asians and Asians, people are like, oh, you're only hanging out with Asians. So why not you talk about the people who only hang out with when it's like, why is the white people only hang out with the white people? They don't say that. But it's like when Asians hang out with Asians, why is the Asians only hang out with the Asians?
Yeah.
But like I love my white friends or like, you know, my Colombian friends or like my Spanish friends, because I feel like when I hang out with them, it's like you hit another pinnacle because you're from a different cultural background. So it's like you have so many differences. It's like another out of your comfort zone. Well, I love hanging out with my Asian friends because I feel like it's within my comfort zone. They understand me, they understand my culture and like what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. But when I hang out with people who are from another ethnicities, I feel like it's another kind of high. You know what I mean? It's like another pinnacle that you can hit with your Asian friends that's within your comfort zone. But yeah, personally for me, it's more Asian friends.
Right. I guess I can kind of understand why the experience that you just described, that your white friends, white American friends, they're being kind of judgmental and critical about like you just hang out within your comfort zone.
Yeah.
I guess me moving to Vancouver, I was in the same mindset. I thought, oh, I'm going to make all these like white-looking friends, like
that you see in the movies.
Yeah, the kind of people you see on movies. And I went there. I didn't realize Vancouver is kind of like a big Chinatown. A lot of new immigrants there. So a lot of people like me moved there in your early teenage years, and it's very easy to gravitate towards people and culture and the kind of food that you know, right? So it's not so much that I don't want to branch out of my comfort zone to make new friends. It's that people just gravitate towards what they're feeling more comfortable with.
Right.
Yeah.
And what they are taught or what they recognize, I guess.
Yeah. So I don't know.
So your conclusion is you have more Asian friends?
Yes, definitely.
What about you? You growing up?
I think part of the privilege of growing up in New York City is to have access to so much diversity.
Right.
And I grew up in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which is way privilege, so much privilege. And most of the people in Upper East Side and my high school were predominantly white, especially white Jewish. So most of my friends were not Asian. And I think if you have that experience being brought up in where you're the different one, you're the minority, and for me, I was like the token Asian friend for a lot of my friends. It was like, oh look, I have diverse friends, look at Calvin, right? And I was singled out. To me, to try to belong in what you feel like, you try to create that belonging that you lack in other parts of your life, you start avoiding Asian friends, and that's what I did for the first half of my life. I didn't want to be typecast and stereotyped and just another Asian person.
Hanging out with the Asian people.
Because I wanted to belong with the majority, which was predominantly what I grew up was white. Then in my own high school, I become a little more self-aware of my identity, that I was different, and instead of being ashamed of it, I should embrace it. And part of embracing it was to get more involved in the Asian American community. But I always had my toes dipped in two different parts, my hands in two different cookie jars. I had one foot out the door, one foot in another door, right? Trying to balance the two identities, because you know I grew up here. My language, the way I speak, what I'm familiar with is predominantly the majority. The Upper East Side Manhattan, right? But also there was a community that I look like, that I feel like I should be proud of and be a part of, by engaging in more community work with them. And then I eventually became more involved in Asian American activism and issues. My friend group started diversifying a little more, if you will, from the opposite end. So I mean, it is a journey, because I think if you look at my friend groups, it might seem at times I have more Asian friends than non-Asian friends. But then if you look, at the end of the day, I have more black friends than any other friends, because I did a lot of dancing in college, and a lot of the dance groups I was part of was predominantly black. And then I did salsa and in college, and then all my friends became Latino. Then I lost a bet and ended up on a South Asian dance team, and all my friends were South Asians, right? And it's just like, I think take me on any different day, I can't quite put a finger to it. I think right now it's all like, I'm friends with whoever you are, as long as you're a good person. I'm not to say it's colorblindness, because I don't believe in colorblindness. There's always a context in which you are friends with one another, why you are engaging in those different community groups. And I think I'm a lot more self-aware of hats I wear whenever I engage my social life, and it can be very confusing to a lot of other people, because I think it's human nature, as you said, like you gravitate towards more Asians and people that look like you. That's normal. That's a human nature thing. I like being comfortable, in the times of stress, especially starting a new school. I tend to gravitate towards people that look like me. That is something that I think a lot of people do. But I think to challenge yourself to basically learn more, to be more open-minded, is to challenge yourself to, I guess, become friends to get yourself out of the comfort zone. To strive to fail, to strive to reach out to community groups that you've never interacted with before in order to learn more about yourself. I mean, I like this concept of, quote, Ubuntu. A person is only a person through another person. The only way you get to understand yourself and see yourself fully is to have as many diverse and different people surround you, to act as mirrors in what you see. And I think that's what I strive for. And this is not something like I planned for in the beginning, but I think I just gravitate always looking for something that was outside my comfort zone. But I totally understand why people would, gravitate to one over the other. But I think if you develop a sense of self-awareness, you don't get pigeonholed. And one last thing, opposite-wise, when people like to see you, they like to pigeonhole people into boxes. Oh, Kessyl, she's the one who only hangs out with Asian. Oh, Carol, she only hangs out with Canadians or whatever, right? It's comfortable for people to do that. But when you don't do that, like when I don't do that, it's very threatening to a lot of people, because people want to put you in boxes, and when don't let yourself do that or let them do that for you, you run into a lot of antagonism, which you could talk more about. So it's actually hard to become friends with people when you try to be diverse in New York City.
If I may jump in, I'm just curious. You mentioned like the first half, you kind of try to stay away from like, the Asian crowd, right? What made you want to turn around and recognize like, oh, these are people that maybe I want to get to know a little bit more?
I think because I was being bullied a lot in the beginning, and I was very self-hating. I was ashamed. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be cool. And part of the idea of being cool back when I was growing up was being white. Right. It wasn't being a person of color. Right? Because everybody was white except for me and like maybe 2-3 other people, and they had assimilated, if you will, more than I did. They embraced it more than I did. For me, I was like, kind of being Asian, not being Asian, like, I had parents like yours who like had very strong Asian values that was like, study really hard, don't socialize, don't hang out, play dates are stupid, math and science all the way, and take off your shoes before you come inside. And so I was like, that's what I grew up in, but then I was thrown into a predominantly non-Asian environment where those values seemed a little foreign. And then it turned around when, after being bullied enough, I think in high school, I was just not happy. And it's actually a clear story to it. I don't know if time to it, but my brother sent me a link to this trailer to a movie called Better Luck Tomorrow, directed by Justin Lin. And it just hit me, right? It was the first movie ever to feature non-stereotypical roles for Asian American people. It was about Asian people in high school, just doing the high school things, but using the stereotype of they're good at math and science, like they're good students, as a cover to commit crimes. So they would do all these crimes and get away with it because no one would think would be them. And then I went nuts, and then I embraced it, and I threw this movie screening for it, and 700 people showed up. The cast and crew showed up. The director, Justin Lin, showed up. Wow. And then it was because of that screening that I organized that day. It's like a big impactful part of my life. So he came up to me and was like, did you do anything Asian American related? Like, why did you care so much? Why did you organize this? You're 15 years old. Wow. And I was like, I don't know, I just saw a movie that spoke to me, and I wanted everyone to see it. And then they invited their friends, and came, and he was like, well, welcome to the movement. Like, you want to learn about what it means to be Asian American if you're this proud. And I never thought about it until he got a phone call later that night and told me, and was like, because of this screening, I got a job offer to direct Annapolis, and then Fast and the Furious 3, and now he directed Fast 5, and now he's Fast and Furious 7. He did Star Trek. John Cho was in that movie. His career took off, and then he came back in college to remind me, like, you're part of something bigger. And that's when I realized, this is something more than me.
It's so good that you mentioned this. Like, this is when you're 15. I assume that's like more than 15 years ago, right? So it's just like, this was already happening as like Asian American, and now we see how Aquafina just hosted SNL last Saturday. It's amazing, and I actually looked back at what Lucy Liu did. Yeah. So I just felt like that real, she was acting as the stereotype. She was like, as a Vietnamese, fixing the nails, like doing the hair, ironing the clothes. And I told my friend who's Asian American, I'm like, why did Lucy Liu did that? It's funny, like we laugh about it, but I don't think that's necessary. But he told me that that's how Asian Americans are portrayed in those days, and we just laugh about it. But Aquafina did none of that this past Saturday.
Right. I think it's a very long road of like evolving, right? I think back in the days, that's pretty much the kind of role that she can get. And if she can make people laugh.
And make Asian Americans at least known or something.
They kind of take the power out of the joke. If you can make people laugh and you're a part of it, then I think I can kind of understand why she did it. And I don't think she meant any harm towards the community.
Definitely.
And I like how you mentioned the movie kind of struck you a little bit. Because I remember when Fresh Off the Boat was out, I didn't really understand the emotion behind it. But all my friends in New York, all Asian Americans, regardless if they like Eddie Huang, they're like, yeah, we're pro this show because we just like to have some kind of representation of Asian on TV and movie of any kind. But the emotion behind it, I cannot really relate because I grew up in Taiwan and Vancouver. And Vancouver, like I mentioned, is a big Chinatown. So I did not feel like I was being bullied. And for the most part, socioeconomically, we're actually better than most of the white people in Vancouver. So I don't really feel like we need to like voice out our like rights or whatnot, right? So understand how like Asians in North America have different mindset and different backgrounds. Very interesting. That was a very interesting.
And especially within the American diaspora, East Coast, West Coast, right? West Coast is very different. There's a lot more Asian Americans there, or Asian Canadians, or Asians. But in the East Coast, right, a lot of poor socioeconomic Bengalis, Pakistanis, or Filipinos, Laotians, Hmong, right? They don't have a lot of money, you know, as much as East Asians, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, right? And that disproportionate does play a role in, you know, what the power dynamics of even within our communities. We don't like work together and, you know, fighting, you know, we actually end up fighting more against each other, especially for federal government funding. You know, things like, hey, what money should we get to? Oh, the Asians are doing fine, right? And other Hmong, Thai, and Southeast Asian, like, what about us? And it's like, no, they lumped us in with the Chinese, Koreans, and Japanese. So it becomes an issue in there where we're not working together. So what these media things do, it's like, it is kind of turning away from the actual like problem of like, you know, immigrant rights and, you know, socioeconomic disparities. But it is also something in the media that's something we're working hard to, that kind of puts us all together
in one lump sum.
Yeah, in a way that we're finally working together for something positive. And also like the power thing. Who's writing these roles? When Lucy Liu like was starting off, the only role she get was whatever the white writers wanted. Where now Fresh Off the Boat and Crazy Rich Asians, we have now Asian Americans doing writing.
Or like Malaysian writers. Yeah.
But we are finally having Asian Americans who can stand up to their parents and say, you know what, I don't want to be a doctor or a scientist or engineer, I want to be a writer.
I want to be Jeremy Lin.
Or Jeremy Lin, right? But you finally be a writer. So you had to finally have that confidence to stand up to your parents and be different, to assume it's a position of power where we can give those roles.
Okay, how did we get here again? I thought we were talking about Friends.
I just was like, a lot of
isn't Aquafina like a friend of a friend of a friend because she's from Queens? I think I know a couple people know her. So they were all friends here.
Yeah, man. Okay, so let's move on to our third question.
What's that question?
Yeah.
All the time.
I know.
I already mentioned this. Yeah.
You want to start first?
No, I already gave my answer all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I was picked. I was picked until I started picking on them. You know? Up until like middle of high school.
Yeah, but for me, it's like when I was in Malaysia, it was never, because although Malaysia is made out of mostly Malays, right? But I agree with Carol. It's like, you know, as a Chinese in Vancouver, you are like socio-economically doing well.
You're not.
You're like the minority, but not really. So I didn't felt like that was when I was in Malaysia. But of course, when I went to West Virginia, I wasn't picked on. Hey. Heads up, I love West Virginia and I love everybody at Marshall University.
There's a butt coming up,
but I felt a subtle racism. Yeah, I'm not picked on, but it's just like when you are the only Asian in a room of 60 white people, you are just, they don't like,
you're different.
They don't pick you, but it's just like, maybe they're not that interested in wanting to like make friends with me, you know? So I felt like an outcast. That's how I felt like I'm picked on because of my look. I don't think, maybe I'm defending them, but I don't think they're racist, but maybe it's like, oh, I've never seen an Asian person before, so who are they like what are they like? So I'm not going to be friends with them. Maybe because I'm scared, because like what, in university they are like 17, 18, 19, you know? They've never seen the world yet. But I mean, I have a couple of white friends that are like, you know, they are really open, maybe because they have traveled and they are more open to wanting to know more about me. So I have a couple. Yeah. So in that case, picking on is like that. But I want to talk about this term, FOBs, you know? You know about FOBs? Yeah. That's how people call people who are from like, who's not born here.
There's a TV show named after it.
Right, fresh off the boat, whose mother tongue is not English. So like FOBs. I've never been called FOBs, but you know, I have friends who are like, yeah, they're called FOBs.
And usually I'm like, what does that mean?
I know, it's like I do something, oh, you're so FOBby. I'm like, yeah, but Carol.
Have I ever got picked on? I can't really think of it.
Must be nice.
Wow, she's privileged.
So nice.
I think it's mainly because in Taiwan, everyone looked like me, kind of. In Vancouver, I kind of stay in the safe zone. It's a very Asian high school. You have the typical high school problems. You know, you feel like you're overweight. You try to hang out with the cool people and all that, but. Not so much because we are Asian, because Vancouver is full of Asian. Yeah. And coming to New York, so diverse. So I would say,
before.
Yeah, I wish I have more juicy stories to share. But this one, I just have to.
I have enough to make people cry. I
think New York.
Too much. We don't have enough time for that.
Yeah, but in New York, not for me, but in West Virginia, a little. But like you said, New York is so diverse. But for you, even you grew up in New York, you said,
I still get it today. I still walk down the street and we're like, go back to your country, you know?
Oh my gosh, seriously?
No, like I see patients, it's like, oh my God, where are you really from? I'm like, oh, I have an adopted son that looks just like you, you know? Things like that. And I'm like,
they're trying to relate, but in the...
I call it racist love. Like, they have really good intentions, but the behavior ends up like making you feel like, ugh, you know, like I'm not, like here is another person that makes me feel I don't belong here. Right. And it's intentions versus behavior. I think people have good intentions now. They really want to relate to you, as you say.
Yeah, it's like, oh hey, I love Chinese food too.
But it's so dehumanizing, right? It's not like I go up to like you and like, you know, talk about something that's objectifying, like see you for only the clothes that you wear, or see you for like how wealthy you look, right? I want to get to know you as a person. But when you say things like I love Chinese food, like where in my being, in my core, you know, can I relate to that in return, right?
What if I'm from Vietnam, you know, like I've never eaten Chinese food?
Exactly, and it's just the assumption of that. They have good intentions, but the behavior is horrible. Like it just makes you feel like, it's like, I didn't intend to run over your foot, but I broke your foot. So there has to be some kind of reparations for that.
Because they don't know, or they are ignorant, or they've just never have a conversation with somebody who doesn't look the same as them.
I think it's just a lack of experience, and they're not willing to see past that, and there's a lot of entitlement too. So
we're gonna forgive because you don't know, you know. We're not gonna like, oh, you're being racist and things like that.
Well, we try, but then I think it's also, unfortunately, some people think, I'm not saying it is, some people think it's our responsibility to also educate them. And the kind of argument is like, no, it's not our responsibility to educate them. They need to educate themselves. They already have enough privilege, you know, as whatever, non-people of color, to learn about this stuff and know better. And for us, we need to take care of ourselves first.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I think coming back to that question, now I have something to share.
Okay.
Hey, we jogged up a memory.
I didn't really get picked on, but I do feel the way I look and my ethnicity kind of, it does kind of have that bamboo ceiling, you know, sometimes we're in the workforce. I hate to say that, but when you're working for a company that's predominantly white and being an Asian female, sometimes you do feel like you're being discriminated a little bit.
Not a little bit. Like, there's a systemic institutional discrimination against Asian women in leadership roles.
There are just numerous times that I try to fight my boss in a very gentle way and making him know that I'm doing twice as more as my white male colleagues who's just sitting right across from me. And still, they would get paid 3 times more than what I was paid.
Wow.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
So I think that it's not exactly how I look, but it's kind of the same thing.
Wow.
Well, it's also like, if you do stand up for yourself, there are also built-in systemic institutions of oppression to make you feel like you shouldn't have stood up for yourself. Oh, she's not being bossy versus being bitchy. You know what I mean? Like that whole difference. Like when a man does it, he's doing great. He's standing up for our company. And it's at that double standard. And I think we talked about even earlier the double standard of how people perceive us and why is it okay for them, like white friends to hang out with only white friends, but for Asian to hang out with Asian friends, it's not right. Double standards are built in to make us question ourselves. And when we are feeling vulnerable and we're feeling like maybe we should and shouldn't, most of us retreat and we end up not saying anything. We end up backing down. But that's what they want. They want us to, second guess ourselves because that's their best defense mechanisms to make us feel like it's called gaslighting, essentially. Like, well, we shouldn't do this. When I think that if you feel right about it, just do it because you have much more to lose by not saying anything than you do. I mean, now I'm mansplaining and as a man telling you what to do. You know it exactly. You don't need me. But if I can like reassure you, be a supporter.
It's not a good feeling to be confrontational, especially against someone that's deciding how much you're getting paid or what kind of job you're going to do on a daily basis. But I do feel like people have this perception that Asian women, especially, they're very they're like pushovers, right? You're very passive and you just take directions and you do what people tell you to do, and you're supposed to be obedient, kind of. So when you try to break out of that stereotype, not only your managers or boss, they might judge you. Also, your colleagues around you, sometimes they do give you a hard time. So I do think it is hard, but if you believe it's the right thing, go for it. Just try not to lose your job.
Try not to play smart, but like identify your accomplices. I hate this idea of allyship. So there's these intersections of oppression. There's people of color, like that's we all share, right? We're not white. And then there's also the gender, right? You're both women, like I'm not. I'm a man. I have so much privilege as a man. I'll never know what it's like to be a woman. However, we can relate on the fact that we both have experienced oppression in different ways as people of color. So what I can do with my privilege is, as an accomplice, I make my spaces feminist and try to make it right for you. But you need to identify, not you need to, but there are people who are willing to take that privilege that they have. We'll never understand what you're going through, but be willing with that, at least just be a good person, to have the empathy, to create that space with it, because they have special privilege access to that space as a man, to create it as something feminist and pro-women, right? But, it's very hard to find those people, but we do. They do exist, and I think
let's start a company.
Yeah,
three of us
work together.
A company, hiring all you guys. But I forgot. Shout out to BuzzFeed. This video is inspired by BuzzFeed. But I really love how we have these questions, and then we just go into this roots of
organic.
In the workplace and like gender. I'm like, whoa, I'm blown.
No, it's very important. I think it's very important. I think we experience on a day-to-day basis, and I think the problem is Asian Americans, we don't learn how to communicate that. We're taught to be obedient, quiet about it.
I think it's a generational thing.
It's a generational thing. And our parents too. Parents is cause no trouble, hang your head low, work hard.
Just like in classroom, hey, don't raise your hand, But in America, it's different. Like ask many questions.
That's why the bamboo ceiling exists, right? Because we don't raise our hands because we're not taught to, and that's why the bamboo ceiling. Oh, they'll never be a leader because we're never taught to. I think this is a first step for us to be like, go out there and talk about it. Go out there. None of us are going to get hit by lightning when walking out of this room. We're going to be fine. And this is showing that we're showing, not telling, that it is okay to talk about these things out in the open.
All right. So moving on to our fourth question.
Well, this is like a little break.
It's 8-second break. It's intentional. But what is the hardest thing you left behind when you left Taiwan and Vancouver?
My shoes.
Yes. Oh my
shoes.
Why can't you pack your shoes?
I still think about them all the time.
What, was that a carrying capacity requirement on your airplane or something?
I have 100 pair of shoes.
Oh my gosh, Carol.
She's not missing one pair. She's making 100
so
pairs.
Now I see who you are. All you care about is, okay, your mom. Okay, sure.
My mom
comes out the shoes, right?
Donated all of them. So I have, I only have things I wear now.
Good. For me, it's friends. Like, I never ever thought about leaving Malaysia when I first came and study in the US. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be here only for 2 years and I'm going home. I'm not gonna work, nothing. And then I'm like, I'm never gonna leave you guys. But then I left and then it became okay. It became okay. That's the worst. It's like,
are any of them watching right now?
I don't know. But
she hasn't forgotten you.
No, but I love them. But I think you just grow up, and I think you're okay with being away. And if they are your friends, they will be there forever. You know what I'm saying? Like you go home, you're still gonna have a connection, even though if you don't talk for 3 years. At first, it's like, sending them a WhatsApp every day, but then it slowly became a week. a month, and then a year.
Yeah, sadly, out of sight, out of mind.
True friends will always stay your friends. The people who truly love you will support you whatever you do, wherever you are, even if you've forgotten them. I think as the opposite, I've never left New York, so I feel like I'm the TV show, and I've only had guest stars pass through my life, so I'm the one like being left behind and say bye, you know, because I never left New York.
Yeah. Do you still have a lot of friends here, like born and raised here?
I have like one really close friend from high school and a few, they're like acquaintances and we were like friendly, but you know, college, as you get older, and that's the great thing about being in the late 20s, you start cutting out toxic people in your life.
Oh, right.
So some of my people I thought were my friends are now like, it's self-declaring, you know, we cut each other out. So I think over time you have fewer but more meaningful friends than a lot of, you know, people who just are using you for, you know, attention or whatnot. Right. So it's like Darwin, you know, evolution.
Right.
You know,
survival.
Yeah, survival of the fittest.
Right. All right. So moving on to the next question.
All the.
This is a chill one. I don't cuss. What are you talking about? I don't.
Do they even curse words in?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, every single language.
Chinese?
Calvin, come on.
I thought like that would be the first thing you learn.
I think when my mom, really,
No, when you learn another language, right?
Yeah.
It's like if I had a, like, whatever, if you have Spanish or Korean or Japanese friends, hey, how do you say this in your bad word in your language? That's the first word you want to, first phrase you want to learn in another language.
Yeah, always.
But what is it for you? Like Chinese or English or?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess you have to like really piss me off one day and we'll see.
So like,
I guess
half?
Yeah, I guess depending on who I'm with.
Oh, right.
And what kind of surrounding.
Right, got it. I think, yeah, same for me. I do both. No, I don't do it, but both, yeah, both.
I know English and I know bad English.
But what is English
a
and
lot
bad
of curse
English?
words in English in different varieties and different forms.
Got it. So English.
It's very poetic, actually.
Should have an
Got
episode
it.
about that.
Okay, so moving on to our sixth question.
That's a quick one.
Yep.
I feel like the dynamic of the show is like from light to like
Lighter.
to no.
I hate them when it's like when they're like watching, like, grab them, and then you cool down.
So, cultural gap in your household within your siblings or your parents?
For me, yeah, it's very interesting. My parents are born and raised in Taiwan, and I'm kind of like my parents, but I spent half of my life in Vancouver, so I'm kind of like half and half. My sister, she is 10 years younger than me, so she pretty much grew up in Vancouver. So in our household, yeah, it's like we have very different ways of doing things, but we all speak the same language, so I think that kind of made up for it.
What about you?
It's tough. I mean, not now, but when I was growing up, there was definitely a huge cultural gap, especially when I became more self-aware as an Asian American than, you know, Chinese son. As an Asian American, I think, you know, that's what part of raising your child as a second generation, first generation, and when they start to, you know, acclimatize and absorb all the differences around them that is different from what their parents grew up. They start speaking different languages, not in a literal sense, but like different languages of emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence. Like you can't go to your parents anymore for certain things that you want to talk to them about, whether you know, romantically involved, have a crush on somebody, or if you feel like you were bullied and you want to like confront them about it. Like those things are completely opposite. So I think the culture gap began really young. I think I had a more unique experience because my dad died when I was really young and my mom got sick, so I ended up becoming the only person in my household. My brother's like 14 years older and is from the West Coast, so like we didn't grow up together. So I was like alone for most of my life. So there was, I think, as I was growing up, what I do remember was we're learning two different languages, and that language was very emotional. It was like an emotional one, where I could not rely on them for emotional support, and I couldn't receive the emotional validation that I needed and craved. And a result that has led to, that I think counts as one of my many childhood traumas that has led me to work on a lot of it today.
Like a language barrier or like a cultural barrier between you and your mom, because she didn't grow up in the US, but you did. So you're going to experience different things from her, so that your experiences, maybe she can't relate, so you didn't.
Yeah, we can't relate on a lot of things. Like her growing up was, she, you know, had me when she was in high school when she met my dad, or like just finished high school in the age of like 22, 23. Like she started late, she immigrated, and then all that stuff. And then that's it, that was the rest of her life. Just trying to raise me. And then, you know, that was very tough. It's hard to raise someone like me. Just look at me, you know? And you know, for me to be so like, you know, opinionated and standing up for myself and, you know, outspoken, for her, she was very quiet. And
I'm sure your mom has a side of the story too, you know?
Yeah, of course. And then she and I never communicated on that emotional level. And I think it's important for at least us, I mean, for all sons, but especially like, you know, especially for all sons to have a good relationship with their parents, to be able, not all sons, but everyone, right? But like, especially in this world of toxic masculinity and men not learning how to like communicate with their emotions, and we're taught not to cry, we're taught that touching is bad, all of which is not healthy. It's good to cry, it's good to touch, it's good to have emotional human connections. But as men in this society, we're taught to be strong and not, especially the Asian Americans too, like even double on top, like don't communicate emotions, and mental health is not a thing. Right? For me to not be able to have that with my parents and get that emotional like catharsis, right? And especially after my dad died, my mom got sick, who else had to turn to? Wow. And that's why I had to create my own family. And I think I was lucky in that sense. It depends on perspective, that I was able to then create my own family where there was no cultural gaps. I get to pick and choose that family.
You mean, what do you mean create your own family?
It's like to identify a group of friends. So after my dad died, I was in the middle, like sophomore year of college.
6 babies.
Yeah, and all these people. No, I had 10 children I don't know about, and I'm looking for them still. No. All these friends came and helped me out, and you know, was there for me, and I was able to identify who to stay close to, and I had completely relearned the language of my love languages, my emotional like communication skills, and my EQ. I had to reset that all over again after my parents steered clear of taking care of me, and I had to figure it out on myself. But I think that's important when the cultural gaps is just the language, like what there's like the physical language that you have with your parents, but then there's the emotional. Can you connect with them emotionally? Can you depend on them for emotional validation? Are they the first person you go to talk about love and who you like, and or maybe things that you feel uncomfortable talking about, like sex ed. Or things beyond sex ed, right?
I think, for example, just like I'm not sure about American families, but Asian families, you don't really talk about that. Some they do, like they're open-minded. Oh, I should teach my children about sex education before they learn it from
a complete stranger,
or like a guy that's trying to perform it on her, or like
Google, Dr. Google,
Google.com, or like I don't know all these websites. But I think for me, I just like. You go so deep that I feel like my answer is so like surface. I should just shut my mouth.
No, I'm sorry.
For me, I think it's
all I know is the cut deep.
But like my parents, I'm really close with them, so I would go to them and talk to them about, I like this guy, I like that guy, kind of thing.
That's
or like
awesome.
What I'm struggling with at work, or like that I'm not happy and things like that. But of course, there's a cultural gap because they've never lived in America before.
Yeah.
Like at first when I want to come, they're like, why do you want to go so far away, So they're like, America's dangerous, there's like a lot of guns, there's a lot of like natural disaster, just don't go there. They don't know,
Natural disasters.
Yeah, but like hurricane and things, I'm like,
New York buffalo hits you in the face or something?
Like New York has nothing, it's okay, don't worry. But I feel like, even with my sisters, she's like, why are you so American nowadays, She's like, because my second sister, she went to Australia to study abroad. But my elder sister, she just loves family, she doesn't want to leave. So she's like, oh, so you're American now? She like, just tease me and things like that. But I just feel like maybe it's good. I think it's a good cultural gap for me because we get to learn from each other, but at the same time, I can still rely on my sister. Like, when I have a problem, like I can get her Malaysian viewpoint or like a Chinese viewpoint instead of like telling my American friend, and she's like, this is what you should do, But I think it's all good. Like I like to go back to the differences and lean on my parents, I don't know, stability or like their background and how, even though they grew up in another country, but I'm sure they have their values that they hold on to that I can learn from and input into my life in the US.
Right. I just think it becomes super obvious though when you compare it with other. So I was like working with a colleague, and his son, he's like much older, but he has a son who like got detention for it, being bullied, right? And apparently got into a fight. And I hear him on the phone, like, he's like, stop seeing patients for a second. He goes on the phone and says, what happened, buddy? What happened? So he got detention. He's like, what? Did someone hit you? Well, you got to hit back. Did you hit him back? Did you hit him back? You got to hit him back, because otherwise they're never going to, like, stop doing it. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, like, my dad will never tell me that.
Right.
Like, I would do that with my son. Like, yeah, always stand up for yourself. Like, I don't care if you got detention or not. You need to stand up for what you believe in, right? And it's just so weird. Like, my dad will never ever say that to my face. But the thing is, at his funeral, his secretary came up to me and he was like, "Oh, you're that son that always fights him and stands up to him and everything." And my brother always says yes to everything. And he's like, "I'll never tell you this, but every time he get on an argument on the phone, he'll slam the phone down. You're like probably upset, crying because we're listening in, and he always, your dad always go like, ah, and then look at me. He's like, you know what, and smile. And he's like, you know what, I'm really glad he can stand up for himself. But never tell him that. Never tell him that. And that broke me. And I was like, oh my God. But like, see, that's the thing. Even when he wants me to do exactly what my colleague did, right? They don't have that language. They're not comfortable telling that honesty to their children. I think that's a cultural gap.
Yeah, because I think in like Chinese culture, you're not supposed to be confrontational. You're supposed to be obedient. You're supposed to, in Chinese, it's called 儒家思想. So basically, you're just supposed to be like a mediocre person, so that you play everything safe. That's how you live a very long and prosperous life. So I think it's hard for him to turn that around in his mind, be like, okay, now I'm going to abandon all of the things that I was taught and believe in and tell my son that you're supposed to get into trouble and stand up for yourself. I think it's just hard for him.
It's hard, but but then that creates, I think it's not just my dad, that's a generation of screwed up Asian Americans who want that validation from their parents, and their parents are so close to telling them, but they can't, and then all it is just a simple statement, like, I see you.
Or like, right? I love you.
I love you, right? I'm proud of you.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it is. One sentence can do so much, but then you have a generation of people who like go through life looking for emotional validation, causing a lot of problems with their future kids because they never learned that language.
Right.
When you can solve that easily with parents who just say, hey, son, I just want to tell you something I never will tell you. You say it again, so record this. I'm proud of you. So I think that's important. That's a culture.
Now my dad says I love you, so I think that's a big breakthrough.
That's nice.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually have like 8 questions, but due to our time limit, I guess we will end here. But I think we came to a conclusion that not all Asians are the same. Right?
We might look like, even though you have small eyes, doesn't mean we're the same.
Actually, like 3 of us have pretty small eyes. No, Carol has the biggest like eyes. But like people might categorize us as, oh, like they're Asians or like, but all of us are like different. Like I grew up in Malaysia, you grew up in Taiwan, and then you grew up here. Like just the 3 of us sitting here, we are all different and we have different experiences and we have different perspectives and different upbringing.
And we all have stories.
Yeah. Do you guys have something to say in closing?
My dad, he said he loved me. So
Aww, you have to cut this and then send it to him.
Must be nice. No, that's awesome. I'm happy for you.
All right, so so good to have you here with us, Kelvin. Thank you so much. We are getting him to come and sit in this show at least once a month. So
unless you all comment right now how much you hate me,
no, like
I won't read them.
But yeah, so don't forget you can always tweet us at our Twitter. My Twitter is HeyKessyl.
Summer C4, yes.
And what's your Instagram handle?
Monsoon Diaries, MONSOON Diaries, DIARIES.
So like tweet us, like let us know what you want to hear from us, what you want us to talk about. We will definitely look over it. So have a great week and we will see you next time. Bye.